welcome everybody to the second of our series on disabilities. We appreciate all of you taking the time out to join us this afternoon for what I think is going to be a very interesting discussion. If it's anything like the first one, which I will say, I learned a lot, and I think we certainly have taken a, shall I say, a renewed focus on trying to highlight some of these issues around disabilities, both intellectually and in the practice that we do as a program. We are certainly been made aware of some things that we were not doing very well, and it's raised our awareness, and we have certainly vowed to do much better as we go forward with this. Well, today's discussion, we have two SREB associated persons speaking with us today. Today's discussion is led by SREB scholars who have lived experiences in this arena. Our first presenter will be Dr. Mercedes Cannon. Dr. Cannon directs the Accessible Educational Services for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Indiana University. And is that still part of your title? Or they cut the diversity equity out of it already?
Absolutely. So I am in student affairs.
Okay, there you go. All right. She provides strategic leadership for accommodation processes, disability services, accessibility education, and partnerships across the IU campus and the entire Indiana system. Dr. Cannon introduced the Accessibility Educational Services community of practice to advocacy for disabled students and foster a sense of belonging on the IUI campus. As a Black woman and mid-level administrator with a speech and language impairment diagnosis, she navigates the intersections of personal and political identities. She has authored articles in leading journals such as the International Journal of Qualitative Studies in Education. Dr. Cannon earned her degrees at Indiana University, Purdue, Indianapolis, and completed her PhD in Urban Education Studies in 2019. As I said earlier, she is a graduate of the Doctoral Scholars Program. Our second presenter is Ashley Chachi Bocanegra. Ashley is a second-year doctoral student in the Pain Lab and Clinical Psychology Program at IUI, as in Indiana University, Indianapolis. She earned her BS in psychology from the University of North Texas, Denton. Ashley's research interests center on examining racial differences among women experiencing gynecological pain from various conditions. She seeks to understand how these differences influence their experiences and concerns regarding pain, as well as the barriers they encounter to obtaining adequate care and having their voices heard. She is particularly drawn to qualitative data, as it allows for a deeper understanding of their unique stories and perspectives. I'd like to thank both of you all for agreeing to be part of this discussion today and to help us think about and discuss some of the issues around disabilities on campuses and how students engage in these. So let me get things started by asking both of you who've expressed having disabilities. Could you just get us started and talk a little bit about your own experiences with disabilities and that impact on, or the impact of that on you on campuses? Anybody either one of you want to start?
I guess I can start. So I have, again, I'm Chachi Ocanegra, And I have several physical mobility disabilities that require me to use different mobility aids at different time periods of my life. So sometimes I'm walking with a forearm crutch, sometimes I have a walker, sometimes I have a wheelchair, depending on what my condition allows me to do and what it does not allow me to do. So navigating campus can be particularly difficult. I mean, Indiana University, Indianapolis was really built as a commuter university. So it was really established for people moving in and out that have the ability to really navigate downtown spaces, not necessarily kind of built around individuals that might seek some more accessibility needs. But I think that Indiana has done a really great job in addressing some of these issues, but I think that these issues continue to persist regardless where you're at. As a graduate student, I know that I've encountered difficulties with facilities, like having issues with um, accessibility buttons to be able to enter spaces, issues with elevators not working, fire drills on the 3rd floor, just several different things that kind of limit your ability to navigate your space. And then also, I am not particularly used to basements, and this is my first time experiencing basement spaces being in Indiana. So being disabled and going down to basements could also be difficult if in case a fire drill happens or something like that. Your ability to actually get to the 1st floor to get to safe and adequate spaces. So I've had issues where I didn't know where to go in moments where fire drills were happening. So I think that as a student, I can say that it's definitely impacted my experience for sure.
Thank you.
Yes, Ashley, thank you for sharing. Okay, so my name is Mercedes Cannon, and I would have to say I've learned the ways in which I think about disability impacts the ways that I engage with others with disabilities over the last 15 years. Before I entered higher education a second time, I started immediately after high school quite some years ago, and I will not give you that year. And then I walked off campus and married, had children, and other things, and returned to higher education 12 years ago with no degree. And so 12 years ago, I walked onto the campus, and what led me here was, as an entrepreneur, owner, and operator of a hair salon, I heard the hearts of women whose children are in school systems, women who were afraid that their children are being marginalized and disenfranchised based off of the ways in which their behaviors showed up in the school system. And therefore, that weighed on my heart. And other things were weighing on my heart as well. And being a hairstylist will wear your physical body out. So I entered higher education with an intent to get a master's degree so that then I can not only engage with women's hearts, but also engage, well, not only engage with their hair, but also their hearts. One thing led to another, and in my undergrad pursuit, because I had some established credits, I couldn't decide what discipline I wanted to go into. So I made a general studies degree. And in my general studies degree, I minored in sociology, Africana studies, and grabbed a certificate in organizational leadership and supervision. As an adult, I kind of figured out more so what I was aiming towards and what I wanted. And I ended up conducting my internship here in the office, to which I am the director right now. It's a long story. I won't give it all to you. But as I entered as a student, an intern, I began to engage with the disability community and with the information that the students that I was engaging with taught me, as well as the literature that I was engaging with. So I entered this space as someone who haven't lived their entire life with a physical or a non-apparent disability. However, I have. So I have a speech and language impediment that came out from a trauma My mother died suddenly and quickly at age 6. I was already in the school system. I was already talking fully sentences, and I shut down. They call it selective mutism. At the time, I had no idea until I returned to higher education. There was even a term for it, more or less grappled with the ways in which I have experienced life over the many years that I was not in higher education, not exposed to others who help to expand our thinking and expand our experiences. And so throughout the years of a student and into professional positions here in this office, I ended up getting my PhD in urban education studies, which is a program that allows you to think really deeply about societal issues. Disability was one of those things I wanted to know more about. And therefore, I focused on that and learned that trauma that I've carried through my life and the ways in which my enunciations, my syntax and writing, my communication vocally. Sometimes I can repeat myself in various times until I clearly state what it is that I am trying to communicate. For a Black woman with a disability or anyone of color with anything to do with communicating a knowledge base, you're automatically assumed to be incapable or lacking or not educated when you come across in such a way, right? We have these stereotypes and assumptions. So many of our students and many people of color, and especially males in special education K-12 system. So what those women were telling me about, I began to experience all the more and understand through the literature as well as my own lived experiences. So I say all that just to say I entered this space with a multifaceted aspect of my existence that has been shaped not only by my intellectual astuteness, my personal experiences, my spiritual and emotional intelligence, but also this professional identity that I take very serious, and the work and the role to which I feel to understand and make space for us to learn and have this reciprocity of knowledge around how do we engage with one another, first and foremost as human beings, but even more so at these different varied identities. Now I'll stop there.
Thank you. Both of you have talked about hidden disabilities that are both obvious and hidden. Can you expand a little bit more on how that has impacted or how that impacts you in your day-to-day engagement, or especially Chachi, when you and I had a really good conversation as you enlightened me about the experience you had at the Institute, and how you were confronted by people who didn't see a disability, how they addressed you. Can you all just talk a little bit about that from your respective perspectives?
I guess I can get started. I navigate my world with an apparent and a non-apparent disability in both senses, since, like I said, sometimes I have my mobility aids and sometimes I don't. So sometimes I think the doubt comes into like, why do you need these tools? Why do you need these mobility aids, since one day I can have it and one day I don't? So I think that there's a lot of questioning in my space that I exist in, so that becomes difficult. As far as like navigating a space with a parent and non-apparent, I think that one thing I really notice in my experience is the type of language that we use. I guess the language that we use to describe those that do and don't have certain disabilities, the language that we use for um, kind of the right to exist in certain spaces. And what I mean by that is sometimes we have our environment is really set up in a way that really accommodates to one type of person, and that's a person that has like a good physical like good physical stance and that can move really around their world really well. Might not need like some language accommodation, might not need like speak to text, might not need something for visual impairment. So navigating a space where sometimes it isn't built for you is really difficult. And then having it be invisible and visible in certain spaces. And I actually want to retract what I just said because I don't like to use invisible. I like to use apparent and non-apparent because saying invisible means it doesn't exist, right? And it truly does exist in that, and that experience exists and is difficult to navigate in those spaces with those things. And like I talked to Dr. Abrams before, we had a conversation about how I navigate the Institute. Navigating professional spaces is extremely difficult when you have a disability, whether it's going to conferences. I was expressing to him, going to conferences takes twice as much effort or twice as much funds to get there, right? And 3 times as much effort to attend. And it's really difficult to kind of get like the same checkbox whenever you're attending things, especially as a graduate student, right? Like you have all these check boxes and all these marks that you have to hit, but it takes you 2 to 3 times more the effort to be able to complete those check boxes because of all the barriers that you face. And then I talked to Mercedes about this as well. There's also overlapping, like there's intersectionality, right? There's also barriers if you have different identities that overlap with you being disabled. So I am also a woman. I am also a Hispanic woman. I am an immigrant woman. So I've had a lot of difficulty navigating my spaces. And when I was younger, having an accent, being disabled, like people don't see you as being able or capable. Even now I've had instances where people were like, can you defend yourself? And I'm like, yes, I still have a voice. I still have that power to do that capability to use my intellect to defend my space and occupy my space as much as I can. So yeah, but I also say all of that to say that it's also a beautiful experience as well. Because of the fact that you have a community. I think those that really have that difficulty navigating that space when we connect, wow, I think it's just a powerful community. I think that there's a lot of strength in that community. There's a lot of resilience in my community. And there's just a lot of want to participate. There's a lot of this eagerness to participate within this community, and we're just like looking for the spaces to kind of tap into, right? And looking for the spaces so that we can be like, you know what, like we're here, we're loud, we're proud, we exist in these spaces. And also, my last point is being an individual that kind of occupies these 2 spaces. And I looked this up, I looked up this stat before coming, and I actually sent it to Mercedes before our meeting. 1.7% of the individuals that are trying to obtain a graduate degree at this point in the United States. And out of that percentage, only 7% of those have disabilities that they have disclosed to their universities, right? This is like a disclosed disability. And that encompasses many different disabilities, right? So if we try to like dissect that even further, we're dissecting that between intellectual mobility, all this stuff. There's only like a set group of people that you can identify with, and in the set group of people that really understand your lived experience and your set experience. And I think that it's a beautiful community. It's a strong community, but it's a community that we don't occupy a lot of space. And I would love to see us occupy some more space in the areas that I am existing right now, especially.
Thank you.
Beverly? Oh, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, in response to what Ashley just shared, it is so important that we understand that we are in community, right? As whether we are professionals in higher education, faculty in higher education, students taking courses and classes, working in higher education as student workers. It's a community. Higher education is a community of people, right, who have this dream, this idea that knowledge changes things, right? That if we share and have this reciprocity and knowledge that we can enter spaces and become better people overall. And so we have all of the different roles we feel. So as Ashley was talking, she made me think about my professional identity as an interdisciplinary scholar and practitioner whose research focuses around discrete disability, right? That Ashley just spoke of, that hits at these other intersecting identity markers where a person is also oppressed, right? And so you have this saliency of a disability and you're asking for access. That's all you're asking for when you're thinking about accommodations. But what that access look like is entirely different depending on the individual and very much different even within the same disability category. So when you asked us about our own experiences here as individuals with so I say I'm an individual with a disability, right? So I'm person first, an individual with a disability. So I'm known to have a speech and language impairment, but you would not know to what degree or what situates itself within what that means. Ashley talks about being a disabled person, right? So meaning that identity, her identity as disabled is different in some ways of my identity as a person with a disability. And so the ways we enter the space, we cannot speak for everyone. All we can do is speak as a member in the community. So I took time to situate myself in my introduction in this space. I'm not an ally of this space. I am actually someone who straddles both pieces of this space, but the ways in which I do that requires that in my discipline, in my scholarship, that I am responsible to handle the weight and the multiple components of being an individual in higher education, coming through this office, and I'm the director of the disability office, and sharing your most intimate aspects of who you are so that you may receive access to something that you need. That doesn't happen for every student. Most students can just come into, they can put their application online with no assistance. They can sit in an interview with no assistance or no type of accommodations. They can do their homework with no types of accommodations. And so when you're a person like myself with a disability, and my disability being a speech and language impediment, and that disability coming out of a result of trauma, then I have to trouble that. So I trouble that. I try to understand it a little more. How much of a speech and language impediment do I own? And how much of it is more of a lack of access to knowledge as I was negotiating education as a young person, right? So we all bring that wealth of knowledge with us into this space, as Ashley just shared. And then we're met with different types of barriers that we are faced once we're here. And so for me, working as an undergraduate student, I would misenunciate words all the time because I'm trying to make up for syllables and sounds I'm not familiar with or even been exposed to. And therefore, I can come across as someone who is, again, uneducated, but I hold a PhD and understand the multiple layers of what that means to be able to do that, right? To be able to understand the social problems around disability in this specific area to which I look at. So that's what Ashley is speaking about as well. And so this whole idea of working in this office as a student, one with a disability, did not receive any accommodations, but yet continued to take the knowledge in from the individuals that I'm working with, which was the students, and then the professional faculty members and staff members and folks on campus and assistive technology to better understand the work of a disability office. And so I sit as a director because I've conducted that laborious work over the years to understand a more holistic approach to the work. Our work, we're required as a disability office, and this is what Ashley was getting at as well, and federally funded to protect under the disability rights that students are not marginalized, students are not treated unfairly, and all these other things, right? But when a student enter our office, they don't just enter for that. They enter as a whole person. They bring their whole selves with them into this space. So to think more about disability rights and disability justice and being able to straddle that space in a manner that is going to be beneficial to higher education requires an accessible educational services community of practice, all of us in practice together, making sure that the space is open and available to all our students as we're learning things such as what Ashley is sharing with us now and even myself.
Well, thank you for that. And Dr. Abraham, I just popped in because I did have a comment in the chat that I wanted to share. We have a person who says they also have a disability that fluctuates. Some days they may appear normal and other days they are very impaired, but still may appear physically, quote unquote, normal. This person was recently encouraged to seek university accommodations, and they have some, but they do not know how this may impact them when they teach courses again. So if Dr. Cannon, if you could start with a response to that and how faculty and other workers approach this in academia.
Absolutely. The laws are different. So we're talking about for a faculty member, it would be the law of employment, making sure that that individual are receiving accommodations if they require that, right? That's an entirely different office than the disability office for students. Two different places that on all university campuses, I believe, accommodations are implemented. It is a confidential process, so it's not something that is shared with any other person. So the faculty member doesn't have to worry about someone else knowing that they're receiving accommodations or they have disclosed their individual with a disability. That's illegal, and you're not supposed to do that. So they don't have to worry about that. However, I understand that just like the faculty member who is concerned about that, right? Students are also concerned about that. When they come in our office, they want to know, now that we're requesting a accommodation, now we have to inform that professor that this individual has an accommodation. Now, how am I going to be treated? How am I going to be received? How am I going to be able to be taken seriously as someone with a disability? We're talking about respect versus stigma, right? So when you're talking about this disability right, we have the right to, but it's beyond the right. Is you have to foster a community of respect, right? And a community of dignity. So you yourself, to who asked that question, have to be okay with the ways in which you are engaging in space. I had to, I was told as I was conducting my research that people would make fun of the ways in which I would communicate, and they would ask me to repeat myself over and over again, right? So what I ended up doing is owning this whole idea of this trauma from my childhood and facing it face on, right? So I can determine how I'm going to engage this space. What am I going to allow to enter into my decision-making process in the ways in which I contribute to this space, right? And so you have to decide on that, because there's always going to this deficit thinking about disability is something that has been ingrained in the ways in which we think about disability or not, right? So everyone on this call, if you take a moment and ask yourself, how do I think about disability? I wonder what you will come up with. Because the ways in which we think about it is how we treat people with disabilities. And that individual feels that, right? So when people were asking me to repeat myself, they didn't understand what I was saying, and so on and so forth, required that I not engage in that in a way that was disrespectful on their part, but how I can own it, how I can share that I may not enunciate or be able to bring my speech or my enunciations to enunciate a sound, but I know exactly what I'm talking about. And I know exactly how to communicate my knowledge base in a manner that can disrupt and change things. So again, this is confidential according to the legal rights, but a lot of times what end up happening is that the work over here around disability justice and being in a collective and in a community and in places where you are showing up as your whole self, right? And not restraining yourself because of somebody else's discomforts on who you are in the room. And those pieces of this work is what my group of and my team here in our office is trying to get at, is that we're all contributing to trying to make a community and practice more apparent and illuminated on campus. And so so that someone who may need some extra space because they have a physical disability or they need to navigate because they're a wheelchair user, it's not something that we have to make adjustments. We're already prepared for. So we're already welcoming all people into spaces. And again, you receiving these accommodations, again, is private, and it goes through either the Office of Civil Rights or Institutional Equity or whatever it's called on your campus. And that information is private. But many times, because of the stigma, sometimes we feel that within the classroom when we're teaching, or by the responses of our colleagues or students. And so there's that self-work that you must engage in. I hope that was
good. No, thank you very much. And let me just say to everybody, we've got a small enough group that we really can engage in easy conversations. So if you've got a question or you would like to extend or expand on any point our speakers make, just raise your hand or just unmute and jump right in, because we do have a small enough group where we can have a discussion around some of these issues. So let me ask both of you, what, given your experiences, what are a couple strategies that can go in our toolbox that we should know, be ready to employ if you have a disability? What are a couple things? What are two key strategies, tools that one should call upon should one have to navigate this? Ashley,
yeah.
you don't mind?
Yeah,
Going
so
with that one first.
I think the first thing for me is knowing who to contact, knowing your contact list, knowing who deals with what areas of the things that you're struggling with. Unfortunately, I had a hard time getting a hold of like all these different contact individuals, and that's no fault of IUI because we were in the middle of a divorce, so everything was like transferring. So a lot of different things were hard to get contact of. So that's no fault of my institution per se, but just having a good list of who to contact, I think is crucial. I had a situation where my wheelchair was unfortunately damaged in my office, and I am very fortunate with the fact that I was able to contact within my department. And my department heads really got together and problem solved, like, what are we going to do to try to resolve this issue of like her property being damaged, right? And I had obviously it's an awful experience at the same time, but a good experience in the sense that I think that my department really helped vouch for me, really helped be an advocate for me. So just knowing who to contact and knowing who's really by your side, like who are the people that that will stick with you with your problems. Like for me, like I know I can contact like my research mentor. Like I know that he will like email everyone and anyone to resolve a problem for me. I know that there's like people in my department that I can say, hey, I have a problem with the elevators in this building. Can you like point me in the right direction? And they will. And I would also say, make yourself known, like make your presence known. And I just say that in a positive way. I think that we tend to think of like highlighting our disabilities as being like the thing that comes out like first and foremost, but I would just say let your presence be known, just because I think that it's important that people know that you are in this space and that you have knowledge of the things that you're talking about, whether that is in like the disability realm or just letting people know like, hi, there's a person in this space that has one of these identities. Like, I just want that to be known. I want that to be respected. I want that to be acknowledged in my space, which I think is really, really important. And on that note, like, I made myself very known through my campus, and I made myself known to like Mercedes. I knew Mercedes prior to SREB connecting me to Mercedes, because if I have a problem, I really go from the like all the way down to all the way up. Like, I really try to make my environment not just my environment, but better for the environment for others that are dealing with similar issues. So if I see a problem that I know slightly affects me, but I know will greatly affect somebody else, I really try to make the effort to resolve that problem, just so that myself and others can have a better experience on campus. So yeah, just, I would say make yourself known, but make yourself known in the most bright, positive way possible. Let your presence be known. Let your community know that you're present. Let your community know that you're here and that you're a resource for them, and that you're as much there to help them with their needs as they will be for yours. Like, it's a collaboration. It's a conversation. So I think that those are my biggest tools, I would say. And know where the closest parking lot is to every school you're going to.
The very practical,
And the practical
yes,
one, yeah. Know
yes,
which
the very
garages
practical.
have a skywalk directly into your building, so you don't have to step outside. So
Yeah, yeah, those are all great. Also, know that I already spoke about this somewhat, that you're not obligated to explain your disability.
no.
Right.
You do not have to give the details on the ways in which your disability may impact you in classroom, in your dorm room, or wherever it is that you're on campus. You do not have to explain that to anyone. Once you receive accommodations from the disability office, that's the only office that have the information that is necessary to approve your access to whatever it is that you need access to. The implementation process, a lot of times for students, and I can only speak really for students, once they receive accommodations, at times, depending on how they may be, their diagnosis may impair them at different times in their education, they find themselves trying to defend themselves because their disability is there's a disruption happening that is impacting them, and then therefore impacting the homework, impacting the classroom, impacting other aspects of their time on campus. And they're trying to persuade some faculty members, some program leader, that they're committed and that they're serious students. And so they begin to tell their story or try to explain in detail things that the individual really don't need to know. And it kind of sometimes complicated even more so, especially if a person doesn't really is not really reflexive of how they think about disability. It's almost like when we think about terms that for some reason we have, so we need labels, right? I wrote a paper one time about labels. We need these labels to help us to understand certain aspects of, what medication we're taking, what food we want to eat. But a lot of times labels also oppress, right? And cause different type of thought patterns that we don't necessarily know we even have, or biases that we have no clue about. So when I started my introduction, I talked about this. And so I'm constantly being reflexive as I'm engaging research, as I'm engaging with other scholars and faculty members and students to better understand the environment of higher education as a student, as a faculty member, as a person who provides access through accessibility tools, or as a graduate office that is trying to understand what types of accommodations that might be more beneficial to a student than extended time on tests, right? So these are conversations that we must have on a regular basis with ourselves and with the community to which we are providing some service, right? So again, don't over explain, don't tell someone more information than they really need to know, and work with your disability office, because they should be able to work with you, with that faculty member, or with that program, to make sure whatever is occurring with you um, somewhat, we have to somewhat affirm those things to a certain degree, and even ask for certain types of extended accommodations. And then, when you're interacting, even as someone with a disability, sometimes, depending on how much criticality or thinking that we've given to that, to our identities or to the disability world overall, we use this language at times that we name it in higher education ableist language, which refers to the ways in which we express certain terms, like Ashley talked about earlier, invisible, right? Invisible. Instead, we opt out to use apparent and non-apparent, right? Instead of using language for someone who may be blind, and then we're using this language of invisibility. And again, when an individual is blind, they typically have an identity first approach to who they are when it comes to that category of blindness as an identity that they hold. Or someone who has with a disability such as ADHD, right? And so someone with ADHD from high school to college, and the types of accommodations you might have received when you was in high school, and the more wraparound services that you receive to help you to make it through school is not the same in higher education. So kind of know and find out what does it mean to receive accommodations for ADHD in high school, in college versus what you received in high school. Just become more informed on what it is that you're needing access to, whether that's an environment, whether that's a classroom, whether that's a discussion, and then how can we go about making sure that that happens in conversation in community.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
I just wanted, because it made me think about something that Mercedes and I talked about before. A resource that I think, and this is like a hard resource that I think everyone that has any sort of struggle, and I say struggle broadly, right? Because there's so many struggles that we're not talking about in this context, right? Like financial, any other thing, right? Go to these offices and ask for what services are available, because I cannot stress enough that these services are not only there to set you up for success in the university context, but beyond that. For me, I am currently in the process of going through vocational services through the Family Social Security Administration, right? And I did not know that this service existed for me for such a long time. And not only is it a service that would be useful for me to, and I'll just be I'll disclose, I'm trying to get a vehicle so that I can get my wheelchair. And I didn't realize that was a service that I can get through and know about through my institution. So, and I didn't know that I could receive that help in general. And going to these offices is not just about, let me get this accommodation for this class. It's about what accommodations, and I don't even like to use the word accommodation just because of the sense that we shouldn't be accommodating to our environment, but unfortunately that's like the everyday language that we're using. But how can I best fit in my environment in the safest, most practical way? And that is trying to find these resources and these tools. And that will be for life. That will be for my profession. That will be for my professional space. Like I need to be able to go to work safely, right? Even beyond being at university. So I think that that's really important. And then just really like these services, you're paying for them. Like I also cannot stress this enough too. Like in the university, like these are offices that exist because like, your tuition is helping get these resources to you. Please use them. And as a graduate student and an undergraduate student, you're juggling school and life, right? You're not just living only in the context of school. That's not the only space that you exist. So use these offices to help you in the spaces that you exist, even outside of school. I think that's so important. We are people that exist in multiple different spaces, and however you can help yourself, please do it. And ask questions. Like, don't be shy to ask the questions that you feel like may be bothersome, annoying. Like there may be an answer that you may never have known it existed unless you ask it. I am profoundly known as being the person that will just ask questions and then just like hound you to death. But I'm just the person that I'm like, if I can get this information for myself and for others, I just will, regardless of how difficult it is sometimes. And unfortunately, in the space that I exist, like as a woman with a disability, as a graduate student, sometimes it's like hard to carve out that time. It's really hard to make that space and to advocate yourself. Advocating for yourself is an extra job. It's an extra job on top of everything that you do. But if you even shave a little bit of time for that to put into the things that can help you long term, please do it. Just because I think that we don't realize how much it can set us up for success until we have it already set and in motion, and how much more space we have to ourselves afterwards.
I really love what Ashley has stated, because again, it gets at really holding some type of responsibilities to as students, as again, members of a broader community. When you know what the community holds for you and what you bring into that community yourself, then it makes us more informed and cohesive. As a university, as and the multiple services and the different disciplines for our office, we have to work with all 17 schools we have on campus. And so our office have students in all of those schools who are requiring accommodations. And so we get to know faculty members, deans, we get to know people at the graduate office. Just see Janice Bloom on here. I didn't mean to call you out, Janice, but we get to work with the school, the professional schools on campus, right? So we get to build these relationships with these different offices that help us to provide resources to students such as Ashley, or for our medical students, understanding their phases that they have to go through, and the technical standards that exist. Like all of that is really important information for our office to be able to understand and know, so that then when we're in our relationship with our students who are receiving these services, we're better equipped to advocate, to make sure they have access that they need to be able to be successful, to feel like they belong in this community of practice. But it pushes us beyond the fundamentals of awareness into fostering intentionality, where that impact on that student's life, as Ashley keep helping us to understand and see through her comments, makes a huge difference, right? Because when she doesn't have to carry that all alone. If we already are doing some of that work by gaining resources and information from both internal partners and external partners, there are some wonderful non-for-profit communities, the Governor's Council with people with disabilities. We had 2 years. We've been able to work with them. We just partnered with the mayor's office. We did not do that work before. All we did in our office was stay on campus. Now we have extended to the community beyond that, so that then if a student calls and asks for some type of assistance, something like what Ashley's talking about with Voc Rehab, she had no idea that Voc Rehab could provide her and connect her with a whole company that make vehicles accessible for students who are having some type of mobility. Are just this past March, one of our wheelchair users alum came and spoke to our disability awareness month luncheon about how she navigated her master's program, how she navigated her education, and now she's out working, right? And so she's talking about her life beyond higher education and how it's impactful to, and she's contributing to the broader community. And that's what we want for all students, right? We want that for all students. And so whether students have or have a disability or not, that's what we're trying to get at, right? Why do we single out an identity such as disability and then put all these stigmatizations around it, which provides a lot of barriers, to which Ashley's work is trying to get at, is these different types of barriers that she's hoping to bring into the into the scholarship, where we can better understand some of those things. Wish you a lot of luck on that work.
I always say, I'm not asking for a seat at the table. I'm asking for a brand new table. I'm not asking for you to make space for me. I'm asking for us to all make space for each other. I'm asking us to all reevaluate the space that we are in and how we can occupy that space together. And I think that navigating is like a really good word for what you were saying as well, because we are navigating these spaces. And I think it's also important to highlight that whenever you have, I'm not even going to say disability, whenever you have something outside of your educational experience that is occupying a lot of your time, whether this is medical needs, whether this is family, whatever else is taking up some of your time because it's some place of concern for you, right? There's more burnout, there's more juggling between these spaces, there's more of this fatigue, and there's just more burden on you to be able to navigate these spaces at 100% all the time, right? I talk about it in the sense of I feel like I have burnout in a lot of ways because I'm navigating my life as a student, as a wife, as a patient, as a provider, as a TA. Like I navigate all these spaces. And all of them take some time and all of them take some energy, right? And some effort. And I think it's important to recognize that in these spaces, and I try to like pull up these stats just because I think these stats are so like jarring whenever you see it, right? Whenever I said that from that 1%, that 7% like said that they disclosed that they have some sort of disability, only 28% of them ended up finishing their graduate school experience. Like out of that 7%, out of that 1%, like that's we're shaving down more than half of the students that are in their graduate school experience. And that to me is just such a heavy number to like go against. And I know that I can work against that number. That's the most exciting thing for me is I know that I'm not going to be that number. But the hard thing is to realize that there's so many that are, and it's because of all the things that all these barriers. And there's these like invisible and these physical barriers that we're facing every single day, right? And I, as a person with a disability, I try to be a very outspoken person in my community. I try to be an advocate for my community, but I also think it's important that we all recognize together collectively, because I don't like for it to be, and this is my opinion, right? I don't like to occupy a space where I'm the only one speaking out against these things, right? I want us to collectively agree that having accommodations is not like an extra, it's a right. Disability justice is a civil rights issue, right? It's a civil rights issue. ADA compliance is the legal floor. It's not the end goal, right? It's not the end goal. Disability justice means like equality with like equity, intersectionality, like universal design at every single level, right? We want to make sure that we're being flexible, we're being understanding, we're recognizing the spaces that these students occupy, and then just letting them have the space to be. I think that that's also really important, like giving them the space to say, this is my concern and let's fix it, instead of having to try to climb the ladder all the time.
Yeah, building that accessible educational services community of practice.
For sure. And we've talked about it a bunch, like saying that there's like these barriers after barriers, but at the same time, as we break them down, it seems like another one like comes up, unfortunately. But I think if we as a community kind of all come to the understanding that this is not an accommodation, this is just like we're just giving you access and tools so that you can navigate your space as equally as I can. And that's it. It's not, I'm trying to mold you into my space. I'm trying to give you the space to navigate it however you need to.
Well, I like the way you use the term norm, and just like you're making this our norm. And I do want to compliment you for the way you have gone about informing us as a program. Well, I mean, let's give you credit where credit's due. Our eyes are much wider open about this issue. I mean, we've had 2 webinars. We're literally going to do a session at the Institute on it because we think it's important. And if we can, collectively, I mean, I like the term, if we raise collective awareness, maybe in the future, the next Ashley will not have to deal with so many of these things.
That's the goal.
If we're raising this awareness, it becomes part of the norm of the way we do business. And I like the way you said it. I don't want to see that at the table. I just want a new table. Let's reset this thing so that everybody has a place at the table to begin
For
with.
sure. And just because I am an advocate and I speak about it, doesn't make it like accommodate me, just me, right? So that's why I always say like reconstruct the whole table because you need it for everyone.
Everybody.
Right. And that's my biggest point is that you never know what struggle somebody's going through. I think that we just need to be like, okay, I hear your struggle. What do you need? Like, what do you need from me? What support do you need from me? And that should just be the end all be all, right? And if I hear that somebody's like, oh, I haven't been able to do X, Y, and Z, I'm like the first person to like run to somebody and be like, what can we do? Just because, like I said, it bothers me that they don't have that seat at the table. But I'm like, no, let's just hammer down the space that you exist and then reconstruct it. Like, because I think that that's how our spaces should be formed. Should be formed already. And also the openness to have the hard conversations, right? Like the openness to talk about these things. If you don't feel like something has been addressed in the proper way, then just having the opportunity to talk about it. Like I did with you guys at SREB, like having that conversation and then just growing from there. Just growing from there rather than just stopping the buck right there, which I think is really important as well.
Yeah.
I applaud you, Ashley, and we're so proud of you at our institution. We're just delighted, and I'm delighted that the impact is going national through SREB. I really appreciate this, and you've given us a lot to think about. Mercedes always helps me sleep better knowing that there is a resource on the campus, and I appreciate her going beyond the campus because we are lucky to have a state that has a disabilities council, but making that and resources through the city more accessible to our students. I just wanted to let you know how brave I think you are, because it struck me that there are thousands of you on our campus, and every day students have to come, as you said, and navigate and find the resources, the pathways, and everyone is different. We're all different, right? And so the fact that you're willing to speak about this certainly gives me much more to think about, and I applaud you for being an advocate. I hope that we can make the table much bigger. I hope that someday that all of this is just so easy. I refer to maps. I don't mean physical maps. I mean ways to sell students.
Yes.
Here are all the resources that you need, and look at what you need, and we will make sure it's out there for you. So
for sure. No, I thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And throughout the university, I think, like I said, I think the university has done well when I contact. It's just knowing the resources when you need it, right? It's really hard to get the resource at the moment you need it if you don't know it exists, right? But once you contact them, super helpful. It's just being able to navigate in the moment that you have that urgency and that need is difficult, regardless of where you stand in life and what struggle you live in life. And it's just, how can we better give that resource? Obviously, I'm very passionate about it. But I also think as a graduate student, I'm in a unique position where I can say it as a student, but also as a student that can disseminate that information to other students in the course that I TA for. Like, hey, if you have this issue with accommodation, like, please, like, here are your resources. Like, not only am I receiving it, but I'm trying to give it as much as I can, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just see that constantly.
And I want to say this, Dr. Bloom. One of the things that as a again, I introduced myself earlier as a scholar practitioner, right? So I don't sit on my laurels, right? So from the time before I even stopped my academic work, as a student, I was publishing, right? Working with faculty members, conducting research. And just recently, because it's so important that we understand, we have to be informed not only by the actual experiences and voices of students such as Ashley and even my own, but more of a collective body of voices, right? That comes out of the disability rights and the disability justice community, that comes out of our understanding of a medical framework of disability, a social framework. It's like understanding those epistemologies and axiologies, the value systems, and all of these other things that we bring into this higher education space. So I really want to put a plug in for for the work that I've done over these years with other scholars across the United States who care about these things. And I'm so happy that SREB is getting into this conversation as well, because a lot of times the literature says that, well, the literature on other oppressions don't consider the literature on disability. And so you have these oppression Olympics going on, right? Who's more oppressed than someone else? Understanding the scholarship that exists around this is what I poured into my time in academia. And so thinking about these terrible sticky truths that Ashley's speaking of that pathologize, disable, and exclude students with disabled students and students with disabilities from access, right? And then these subverted truths that voices such as Ashley's help us to understand how you're turning those terrible sticky truths on their head. All of that is happening in community. It's not happening just with that student, with that faculty member, with that university. It's happening across the United States, and it's being published and it's being talked about. So one of the things that is new is this whole idea of accessible educational services, community of practice. A colleague of mine in Colorado, Nikki Coomer, and I, and some graduate students conducted a study around these themes that we have been learning over the years that students with disabilities are experiencing in higher education. And this publication is coming out in a journal of higher education, right? Ahead, the #1 journal that disability offices kind of go to understand the ways in which students experience accommodations in higher education. I only say that to say that sitting on our laurels and understanding and our lived experiences of these things, that's awareness. We want to foster a community and illuminate who's in practice, who's caring about these things, and what are they doing, and how do together, Ashley, we have resources where you don't have to wait for the disability office to provide, that this other office over here knows all about it and they can tell that student, so on. That's the community. And I just wanted to really put that plug in there because it's different. It's something that we haven't done in higher education before, and that is to go beyond the transactional accommodation implementation process to more of the practicing of community and making sure students have what they need to be successful in the fields to which they seek.
Well,
For
thank
sure.
you, ladies, for your time. We have gone over time a little bit, but this has been a very robust conversation. And I do want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you for leading this discussion for us. And for our audience, please know that this is not the end of our series, but we will translate that into some other content that we do plan to move forward. So I'm going to let Dr. Abraham have the last word, and then we will have to end.
I was going to ask if I can say like a closing question, just a question I wanted to pose
You
to
you
those,
have
like,
you have the closing comment. Go for
yeah,
it.
I would just like to say, like, as we move forward, I just want to like let us remember that access is not a favor. Accommodations are not special treatment. Students do not need to earn dignity. And I want all of us as a community to ask ourselves and our campus and the spaces that we exist, like, who's being left out? What are the barriers that we are accepting as normal? And what would our environment look like if we built a culture where care, flexibility, equity are the foundation and not the exception. And that's just like what I want to pose to everyone as we think about access for all, not just for those with a visible or not apparent disability.
A great way to close it out. Great questions to leave us with to think about. But thank both of you for your time and thank all of you for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. And there'll be more on this to come, so just stay tuned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your days.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.